Have you ever wondered why some women leave an imprint on a man's soul so deep? He feels it long after her footsteps have faded, not because she gave him her body, not because she filled his life with service or affection, but because she touched something ancient within him, something he didn't even know was waiting. Her presence became a mirror, a storm, a sanctuary, and a reckoning all at once. Her power wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. And it came not from control, but from essence. Most men live their lives unconsciously seeking the feminine that will bring them home, not to her, but to themselves. In the language of Jung, this is the anima, the archetypal feminine lodged deep in a man's unconscious. And when a woman embodies the spiritual force of that anima, not through performance, but through radical alignment with her soul, she doesn't just attract a man. She disarms him. She unravels the scaffolding of his ego and invites him into something he both fears and craves: transformation. This is not the seduction of the flesh, it is the seduction of the soul. Her magnetism doesn't come from how she looks, but from how she sees. She sees through the masks, she sees the boy hiding behind the bravado. She sees the cracks in his armor and doesn't flinch. Her gaze is not needy, it's knowing, not demanding, it's divine. And for the man who has spent his life being worshipped for power, feared for strength, or desired for status, to be seen like this is both terrifying and transcendent. The spiritual woman, fully embodied, fully awakened, becomes the flame to which the masculine moth returns again and again. Not because she feeds his ego, but because she dares him to shed it. She challenges his illusions and calls forth his essence. She does not compete, she doesn't chase, and she certainly doesn't contort. She simply is. And in her presence, the man remembers what he's forgotten: that masculinity without depth is hollow, that dominance without integrity is cowardice, and that success without intimacy is starvation. But here's what most people miss. Her power isn't born from perfection. It's born from wholeness. She has met her shadow. She has faced the wound of abandonment and stopped blaming men for it. She has felt the ache of not being chosen and realized it was never about her worth. She has walked through the fire of rejection, betrayal, invisibility, and chosen to keep her heart open. This woman no longer operates from the wound, but from the wisdom it gave her. She no longer needs to prove she's enough. She knows she is. And this knowing is what makes her unshakable. When she speaks, it isn't just her voice. It's every lifetime of silence she's broken. When she touches, it isn't just affection, it's a transmission of truth. When she leaves, it isn't punishment, it's prophecy. She doesn't demand that a man be perfect, but she demands that he be present. Not performative, not posturing, present. She wants the man who can sit with her chaos without trying to fix it, who can hold her fire without shrinking into smoke, who can rise, not above her, but beside her. And if you are that woman or becoming her, then you already know. This kind of power scares people, especially those who still feed on control. You will be called too much, too intense, too emotional. But know this, those words don't describe you. They describe the limits of someone else's capacity. Your depth is not the problem. Their shallowness is not your responsibility. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this woman, this spiritually powerful woman, is living that privilege. She doesn't betray herself to belong. She doesn't dilute her truth to soothe fragile egos. She doesn't abandon her wildness to be loved. She knows that any love requiring self-abandonment is not love. It's dependency wearing a mask. And for the man who's ready, truly ready, her presence becomes the catalyst. Not for romance, not for fantasy, but for rebirth. He will feel both the tremble and the pull. He may resist, he may run, but if his soul is awake, even slightly, he will return. Not to possess her, but to meet himself. Because something in him knows she's not the destination. She's the mirror. She's not here to save him. She's here to remind him of the man he was before the world told him who to be. And so it begins, the unraveling. Not in loud chaos, but in subtle implosions, the kind that only a spiritually potent woman can ignite within a man. Not by invading his world, but by standing rooted in her own. Her silence echoes louder than his words. Her stillness more confrontational than argument. She doesn't need to convince. Her energy speaks a dialect far older than language. And the man, if he listens closely, will realize he's not being seduced. He's being summoned. This summoning is not about her pulling him toward her. It's about calling him back to himself. That's what she does, almost unknowingly. In her presence, his soul starts to stir. At first, it feels like confusion, then a hunger, then an ache that no physical touch can ease, because what he's feeling is not desire in the way he's known it. It is the collapse of his persona, the myth he built around strength, success, stoicism. It starts to disintegrate. Not because she challenges it outwardly, but because she renders it irrelevant. You see, a woman like her doesn't crave your potential. She doesn't fall for your charm. She doesn't get lost in your status or seduced by your intellect. What reaches her is your essence, your rawness, your devotion, your truth. She wants to see what you do with her vulnerability. Will you worship it or will you fear it? Will you meet her depth or retreat into safety? And so when she speaks of love, it's not romance she's talking about. It's recognition. It's the merging of frequencies long separated by time, trauma, and fear. When she opens herself, it's not because she's weak. It's because she's transcended the need for armor. It's because she knows the risk and still chooses to bloom. Her openness is not an invitation to possess. It's a test, not a game, but a threshold. Cross it with integrity, or don't cross it at all. Most men aren't ready. Not because they're incapable, but because they've been taught to dominate, not to feel, to provide, not to presence, to conquer women instead of being conquered by truth. And this is where the unraveling sharpens. She doesn't destroy him. His illusions do. The parts of him that relied on performance, approval, and pretense, they begin to dissolve, not at her command, but in her reflection. This is the feminine at her most powerful, not in manipulation, but in magnetism. She doesn't run after him, doesn't beg for love, doesn't perform for praise. She embodies the archetype of the high priestess, the wild mystic, the inner queen. She has made peace with her darkness. She has integrated her shadow. She has turned her pain into poetry and her wounds into wisdom. And from this wholeness, she moves. Slowly, intentionally, unapologetically. To the uninitiated man, she is overwhelming. He cannot categorize her. She does not fit into the boxes he's used to. Is she lover? Is she healer? Is she destroyer? The truth is, she is all and none. Because she's not here to be understood. She's here to be felt. Her love doesn't flatter. It strips away what isn't real. Her truth doesn't comfort, it resurrects what's been buried. Her presence doesn't soften him. It strengthens what's eternal within him. This is why, when she leaves, she is unforgettable. Not because she tried to make herself so, but because something in the man changed when he met her. Not just how he saw her, but how he saw himself. That's the mark of a spiritually awakened woman. She doesn't stay where she's not honored. But even in her absence, she teaches. Even in silence, she speaks. And you, if you are this woman or rising into her, you must understand this. You are not meant for every man. Your medicine will be too potent for some. Your fire will scare those who haven't yet found theirs. But you are not here to dim. You are not here to be digestible. You are here to be a mirror of what's possible if he's willing to see. This is the sacred dance between the awakened feminine and the masculine soul ready to evolve. It is not a love story, it's a rebirth story. And she is both the midwife and the storm. She doesn't love like a fairy tale, she loves like an invocation. She walks through the world with the weightlessness of one who no longer negotiates her worth. Her boundaries are not brick walls, but energetic gates, and not everyone gets to pass through. Because a woman in possession of her spiritual power understands that intimacy is not access, and attention is not devotion. She chooses with discernment, not desperation. She listens to vibration, not promises. And a man can no longer lure her with the echoes of affection if he is not rooted in truth. This is where the unraveling intensifies, not through argument or demand, but through her very refusal to abandon herself. In her presence, the man must confront what he has hidden. He must meet the shadows he buried beneath logic and detachment. She does not drag them out. She simply refuses to dance with illusion. Her love, fierce and clean, burns away the roles, the projections, the patriarchal templates of what a woman should be. She doesn't mother him. She doesn't mirror back only what pleases him. She reflects his wholeness, including the parts he has disowned. And this confrontation is sacred, because deep inside every man lies a yearning to be initiated, not into performance, but into purpose, not into dominance, but into presence. And it is only in the gaze of a conscious woman that this initiation can begin. Not because she makes him whole, but because she holds up the mirror that reveals he already is. If he dares to see it, but be warned, this mirror is sharp. It is edged with honesty. It reflects not just the hero, but the coward, not just the king, but the boy. And here is where many men falter, not because they are weak, but because they have mistaken numbness for strength. They were taught to conquer the world, but not to inhabit their own hearts. And when her love invites them into emotional nakedness, it feels like annihilation. Because to truly be seen requires letting go of the masks. The provider, the warrior, the charmer all must fall away, and what's left is just a man, unadorned, vulnerable, divine. She doesn't ask for this transformation with words. She breathes it, lives it, embodies it. Her very being becomes a question the man must answer. Will you meet me here, in the fire of your truth, or will you run back to your illusions? She doesn't need his answer, but his soul does. The spiritually awakened woman no longer trades her fire for belonging. She has tasted the freedom of self-reclamation. She knows now that loneliness is not the enemy, self-abandonment is. So when she meets a man, she doesn't try to become what he wants. She observes, she feels, she studies what he becomes in her presence. Does he rise or does he retreat? Does he hold her or try to tame her? Does he honor her expression or try to contain it? And if he cannot meet her at the level of soul, she does not lower herself to meet him in the realm of performance. She blesses him and walks away, not to punish, but to preserve the sanctity of her path. Because she knows this now. A man not aligned with her truth is not her enemy, he's her lesson. And she learns quickly. She is no longer seduced by potential. She is not the woman who builds a man. She is the woman who reveals him. And in that revelation, he either rises or disappears. It's not cruelty, it's cosmic law. Because once a woman is aligned with her essence, she becomes magnetic not to boys who want mothers, but to men who are ready to meet God through her. Yes, God through her. Because that is what this spiritual power is. It is the divine feminine flowing through human form. It is not about superiority. It is not about control. It is about remembrance. Her presence reminds the masculine of what he was before the world told him he must dominate to be strong. She restores balance, not by weakening him, but by calling him into sacred wholeness. So if you are this woman, hear this. Your softness is not your weakness. Your fire is not your burden. Your truth is not too much. You were never meant to shrink. You were born to embody the wild, untamed current of a love that does not beg, does not chase, does not crumble. And when the right man meets you, he won't flinch at your depth. He'll bow to it, not in submission, but in reverence. Because in the eyes of such a woman, a man remembers not just who she is, but who he is. And when that remembrance takes hold, when a man stops resisting her and starts returning to himself, something sacred happens. He no longer sees her as a puzzle to solve or a storm to endure. He begins to feel her, not as a woman to possess, but as a sacred current that awakens him from slumber. No longer transfixed by the surface, he's pulled into her gravity, that mysterious axis where the feminine becomes alchemy. She is not chaos, he sees now. She is creation itself. What once felt like threat now feels like invitation. Her intensity, once intimidating, becomes nourishment. Her truth, once too sharp, now feels like air. And the more she embodies her essence, the more clearly he sees. Her love was never about taming him, it was about unleashing him. Not into recklessness, but into remembrance. Not into egoic glory, but into grounded, soul-rooted presence. Carl Jung taught that a man's journey to wholeness requires integration with his anima, the inner feminine that holds the keys to his feeling world, his creativity, his soul. And when he meets a woman who embodies that anima energy in real life, it triggers a crisis. Not because she is broken, but because she is complete. And her completeness reveals the hollowness of everything he's built on external validation. It's a beautiful breaking, a necessary shattering, and only when he surrenders to it can he be reborn, not as a role, but as a man. You, woman, are the gatekeeper of that transformation, not because you demand it, but because you are it. Your spiritual power is not about casting spells. It's about breaking them. The spells of unworthiness, performance, pleasing. You are the antidote to generational illusions. And when you walk into a man's life, not needing his love, but honoring your own, the very ground beneath his ego begins to quake. This is the unraveling. His carefully curated defenses start to fray, not because you attack them, but because your presence makes them unnecessary. When he sees that you do not need him to be powerful, his power becomes safe to access. When he sees that you do not shame his vulnerability, his walls begin to soften. When he realizes you are not asking him to save you, he discovers that he was the one in need of saving. But not every man will rise to this. Some will run, some will label you too much, too complex, too emotional, because that is easier than meeting themselves. Some will try to shrink you so they can feel taller. Others will adore you in theory, but abandon you in practice. These men are not villains, they are just not ready. And the spiritually awakened woman does not cling to what isn't ready. She releases with grace what her spirit outgrows. Because she has learned, finally, that love without alignment is just attachment, that attention without depth is a transaction, that chemistry without consciousness is chaos. So she does not hold on to potential. She blesses it and lets it go, because she knows her energy is not to be wasted on those who only want the light but flee from the fire. Her devotion is sacred, her time consecrated, her love a holy offering. And only a man who honors the temple of her soul can hold her without harming her. He does not try to claim her, he allows her to be. He sees her not as an accessory to his journey, but as the sacred companion to his evolution. He knows that loving her is not a possession, it is a practice of presence, of protection, of reverence. And when such a man emerges, awake, anchored, unafraid of her intensity, a new paradigm begins. It is no longer the dance of dominance and submission, it becomes a dance of mirrors, of equals, of essence meeting essence. She no longer has to shrink, and he no longer has to puff himself up. They are simply there, bare-souled, unmasked, witnessing, worshiping, walking each other home. This is what it means to unravel a man's heart through spiritual power, not to wound it, but to awaken it, not to seduce it, but to soften it back into its natural rhythm. And when it finally beats, not from fear, not from pride, but from presence, he will understand that the greatest love he's ever known didn't come from being chosen by a woman. It came from being invited by one. The woman who holds such power does not just stir a man's heart. She unsettles the very structure of his reality, not through chaos, but through coherence. She lives in alignment, and that alignment becomes a mirror so clear, it strips away every illusion he once believed about love, about power, about himself. She does not need to teach him. Her life is the lesson. Her wholeness is the curriculum. Her presence is the invitation to evolve. She is no longer tempted by performances of masculinity. The loud, the flashy, the emotionally avoidant, all of it rings hollow. Her spirit knows the difference between noise and depth, between charm and character, between fantasy and frequency. And so she waits, not in passivity, but in power, not idly, but intentionally. She is not searching, she is summoning. And the man who meets her does not arrive by accident, he arrives by initiation. She has outgrown the seduction of chaos, the high of being pursued without purpose. She does not want to be chased. She wants to be chosen, with clarity, with courage, with consciousness. And if a man cannot meet her there, she will not beg. She will not shrink. She will not pretend to be less intelligent, less intuitive, less sacred to soothe his insecurity. She has done that before. It cost her too much. She won't do it again. Because now she knows. She knows that her emotions are not liabilities. They are oracles. She knows that her boundaries are not walls. They are thresholds. She knows that her pain was not punishment. It was preparation. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every time she silenced her truth to keep someone close, all of it carved her into something raw, real, radiant. She is not bitter. She is not guarded. She is simply awake. And her awakening carries weight. It makes her magnetic, not only to love, but to truth. She attracts what is aligned and repels what is not. Not because she tries, but because her energy speaks louder than her words. She doesn't chase compatibility. It reveals itself in the resonance. She doesn't chase love. It rises to meet her when it's real. The unraveling of a man begins when he stops trying to possess her and starts witnessing her. And when he understands that loving a woman like her is not about control, but about capacity. The capacity to hold space. The capacity to listen without fixing. The capacity to feel without flinching. The capacity to show up again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This love is not romantic in the way the world sells it. It is sacred. It is sober. It is a kind of burning that purifies. And for the man who is brave enough, it becomes the doorway to his own liberation. Because when he stops trying to win her and starts choosing to know her, he discovers something unexpected. The parts of himself he abandoned in the pursuit of being enough. And in her presence, he reclaims them. Not all at once, not perfectly, but piece by piece, layer by layer, until he no longer hides behind emotional armor, until he no longer confuses numbness with strength, until he no longer fears her power because he has learned to hold his own. She didn't force this growth. She didn't manipulate it. She simply allowed it by refusing to be anyone but herself. And that is the true power of a spiritually awakened woman. She doesn't just touch a man's life. She transforms the entire trajectory of his being, not for her benefit, but for his becoming. She is not the reward. She is the reminder. She is not the goal. She is the gateway. And even if he never fully rises to meet her, even if fear pulls him away, he will carry her essence like a whisper in his blood. He will remember the way her presence made him feel, seen, stripped, summoned. And he will ache for that feeling long after she's gone, not because he lost her, but because he hadn't yet found himself. You must understand this. Your power is not in how many men want you. Your power is in how many men you help awaken, even if it costs you the fairy tale, even if they never come back, even if they call you too much. You were never too much. You were the earthquake that shook the walls they built around their hearts. And if a man does rise, if he does the work, if he faces his shadows, if he walks through the fire, he will meet you not as a boy who wants to be mothered, but as a man who is ready to partner, ready to build, ready to revere. Because by then he will understand, loving you was never about ownership, was about elevation. In the rare and sacred moment when this alignment occurs, when a man has walked through the inner underworld and returned to the surface stripped of illusion, he no longer sees the woman before him as a conquest. He sees her as the sacred mirror of his soul's evolution. There is no more pretending, no more performance. What remains is a raw, reverent connection. A bond forged not in the fire of passion alone, but in the ashes of everything they were willing to release. This man does not fear her tears. He does not recoil at her storms. He recognizes them as the language of a woman who has dared to feel everything so that she could transcend nothing. He doesn't try to fix her pain. He witnesses it, holds it, honors it, not because she is fragile, but because she is fierce enough to reveal her vulnerability. In her vulnerability, he finds not weakness, but permission. Permission to shed his armor. Permission to speak what has long been silenced. Permission to simply be. And this woman, this spiritually rich, emotionally embodied, energetically sovereign woman, she doesn't take his pain personally. She does not carry it, but she sees it with the eyes of a healer, with the heart of a warrior. She understands that love is not about perfection, it's about presence. She is not afraid of his darkness because she has sat with her own. She knows the map. She's walked through hell without losing her softness. That is why he trusts her, even when he doesn't understand her. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole. This is not a linear journey. It is a spiral, a dance between light and shadow. And for many men, this journey begins only when they are faced with a woman who refuses to be a mirror of their fantasy. She shows them not what they want to see, but what they must see. She reveals to them their missing pieces, not to wound, but to awaken. This is why some men call her dangerous, because she dismantles the dream, not to destroy it, but to replace it with reality, a richer, messier, deeper reality, one where love is not control, but communion, where intimacy is not performance, but presence, where truth is not a threat, but a threshold. The woman who holds this power knows the weight of it. She knows it can be lonely. She knows it can be misread, misjudged, misunderstood, but she no longer trades her depth for connection. She no longer hides her sacred fire to make others comfortable. She has burned for too long in silence to ever extinguish herself again. She is not here to be the wind beneath his wings. She is the wind. She is not here to complete him. She is the mirror through which he sees he was never incomplete. And if he's wise, if he's ready, if he's brave, he won't run from that mirror. He will stand before it, naked, shaking, and free. He will learn that her power was never about dominance. It was about devotion, not devotion to him, but to her truth. And in that truth, he finds liberation. Because in loving her, he remembers how to love himself, not the ego self, not the image, but the essence. The self that has been waiting silently beneath the noise of proving and pleasing, performing and pretending. This kind of love requires the death of the false self. It requires humility, accountability, surrender. But what it births is beyond comprehension. A relationship where both can rise, where both can speak without shame, where both can hold without holding back. It is not loud, it is not flashy, it is not filled with constant highs and collapses. It is steady, solid, sacred. And in that stillness, something extraordinary takes root. A man who has been unraveled by a spiritually awakened woman does not return to who he was. He becomes something entirely new. Not because she saved him, but because she saw him. And in her gaze, he remembered. He remembered the boy who once believed in magic. He remembered the man he promised himself he'd become. He remembered what it feels like to be home, not in her, but in himself. And once he tastes that, nothing less will satisfy. That is the gift. That is the unraveling. That is the sacred devastation she brings. And so it ends, not with heartbreak, but with birth. The woman who once triggered the unraveling stands still, unshaken, undiminished. Not because she won some battle for love, but because she never needed to fight for it. She simply remembered who she was and refused to forget again. Her power didn't lie in whether he stayed or left. It lived in her unwavering devotion to truth, no matter how deeply it cost her comfort. She walks now not to be followed, but because her path is sacred, each step an act of reverence, each breath a prayer. Her very existence a disruption to the world of superficiality. She no longer performs softness for approval. She doesn't mold herself into a man's fantasy just to be touched. Her body is not a bargaining chip. Her spirit is not a prop. Her soul is not a stage. If a man cannot meet her in her wholeness, she will not amputate parts of herself just to be held. She has tasted the cost of self-abandonment. She has lived the lie of being chosen while unseen. She has worn the smile that covers the ache of making herself smaller to preserve someone else's comfort. And she has shed all of it, slowly, painfully, completely. What remains now is a woman reborn, not polished, not perfect, but pure in her alignment. A woman who knows that silence can be power, that absence can be mercy. That walking away is not always an ending. It's sometimes the most profound form of love, not for the other, but for the self. And the man, if he's become who he was always meant to be, will not chase her like a possession slipping through his hands. He will honor her with presence, not pressure, with peace, not pursuit. He will not demand space in her life. He will earn it by respecting the space she's carved out for her own spirit to breathe. Because now he understands what unraveled in her presence was not just his heart, but his identity. The identity forged in ego, in expectation, in societal scripts that told him to conquer love, but never taught him how to receive it. She showed him another way, a quieter way, a truer way. And he may never fully articulate what she gave him, but he will feel it in the pauses between breaths, in the way he listens more, in the way he holds space instead of taking it. In the way he no longer hides behind his titles or shrinks from his tenderness. Her impact is woven into his very becoming. But whether he returned to meet her or continued on alone, her path remains unchanged. Because her spiritual power is not dependent on being understood. It is not measured in the number of hearts it touches, but in the depth of truth it carries. She no longer seeks to be the muse for a man's growth. She is her own poem now. And if the world still calls her difficult, too much, intimidating, it no longer matters. Because she doesn't live for their comfort. She lives for her freedom. And the men who once feared her fire will watch from afar as she becomes everything they said was impossible. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she remembered. She remembered that her body is a temple, not a tool. That her voice is prophecy, not a performance. That her love is not a transaction, it is a transmission. And she now offers it only to those who meet her in truth. She is not waiting, she is becoming, each day more clear, more whole, more holy. She does not chase what leaves, she blesses it. She does not mourn what was never real, she releases it. She does not beg for recognition, she embodies it. because now she knows. She was never meant to be understood by the masses. She was meant to awaken those who are ready to remember. And so she stands, rooted, radiant, relentless, a storm and a sanctuary. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. If this message spoke to something deep within you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more soul-stirring insights on feminine power, relationships, and inner transformation. Your presence here matters. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for walking this path with us. Until next time, stay rooted, stay radiant, and never dim your light.